Welcome back, everybody, to another episode of the C.I.C. Lounge. I'm Peter.
I'm Jen.
And today we're going to be going a little off track, and we're going to be talking about a movie that just came out.
The Creator.
Very fun new sci-fi movie.
Just released this weekend, at least here in the United States.
Yeah.
Sci-fi AI is the theme. It kind of has elements of Terminator, elements of Star Wars. Just saw the movie, finished 20 minutes ago. So first impressions?
I thought it was a lot of fun. It was very visually stimulating. It was beautifully done. The acting was on point the whole way through. I thought the story was really well done. I mean, and in this day and age, it's like everything is kind of a copy of a copy of a copy. But even though there were a lot of elements that were very familiar to us from other sci-fi movies that we've seen throughout the ages, I thought they did a very good job with making it their own and a unique story.
I think you're touching on something that we're going to talk about as we review more and more sci-fi movies in particular, is themes and tropes used in science fiction. So this is a story about AI and the inevitable conflict between humans and AI and the different points of view. You know, can AIs be benevolent? And this is a concept in science fiction, you know, that's everywhere. You see it on Star Trek, you see it in Star Wars, you see it in I, Robot, Isaac Asimov's books. You've seen it in Twilight Zone, Outer Limits. I mean, pretty much this artificial intelligence question, and it has come up all throughout science fiction. And of course, now we're actually seeing it in reality with ChatGPT, with all these different art integrating with AI, and the battle over artists, and is there a copyright violation if an AI is being fed, artists' work without their consent, and then learning from that,
And students in school using ChatGPT to write their essays.
Right. So questions that science fiction has been asking for a century or more, we now as a society are going to have to start having answers for those questions.
Scary.
as we're moving forward. And we have time. I don't think we have as much time as people think we do, because a year ago nobody knew what ChatGPT was.
No.
It didn't exist, and now it's like the writers are striking over it in Los Angeles, and actors are like, you cannot take our image data and use it in perpetuity without compensation. That's why the actors are striking. So the issues that are coming up are very real and having an impact on anybody who's in the creative arts. So anyway, back to The Creator. A lot of familiar tropes, and this I think ultimately was the original title of the film was True Love, and you can see that after watching the film that it is kind of it is a love story, like a father-daughter kind of love story, where the protagonist is working for one side, the what you might call the evil empire, or the United States in this case, the
war
West
machine of the Western world.
And so the movie opens with him, he's undercover, he's fallen in love with his contact, with his
he's gone native,
and they're and she's human and he's human, and they conceive a child, and what happens so often in storytelling is that the guys he's working for find out something and then trigger a plan that he doesn't know about, and she's presumed
shit goes sideways.
It always goes sideways, and she's presumed killed, and of course he's lost his wife and child now, and he's not interested in fighting anymore.
Yeah.
So that's like the opening of the film, that's the setup, and then the film progresses with how he's drawn into this, how he, through a series of circumstances, encounters a synthetic, what did they call it?
Oh my goodness gracious.
They had a term.
I meant to ask you about that when we got out of the movie.
Because they call some of them are called robots, some are synthetic. like, I don't know if they just called them synths or something, but anyway, he through a series of events, he encounters this child synthetic simulant. That's it. It was a child simulant, and of course him and the child kind of go through this adventure story where, over the course of the movie, he starts bonding with the child, and eventually you come to find out that while the child is not his, because the child is clearly a simulant, not natural, born of human creation, the child is designed on the child that he had conceived, that his wife had actually,
begun building and modeling the AI intelligence on her own fetus.
Yeah. So the actual child that they conceived together was never born, didn't survive the attack and whatnot. But so, I actually felt the ending was appropriate in many regards, if a bit sad.
Yeah.
I loved the idea of, like, in the end, they have to destroy the big bad weapon, the big bad machine, part of the
Death Star. I mean, the NORAD.
Nomad.
Nomad. That's
Nomad.
what it was.
So they have to destroy the evil machine, and of course, only this childlike simulant that we've all kind of grown to be fond of throughout the movie, and it's meant to be. It's implied that the child would have to die in the execution of taking out this big
where
death
throughout
machine.
the movie you're led to believe that in order to beat the big bad American war machine, this child AI simulant is going to be sacrificed, but the hero of the story really is our protagonist, who grows and evolves in his own way.
And that's really the mark of a good story, is when the protagonist is fundamentally changed by the events of the story.
And not just that, but in a believable way.
Oh, absolutely.
How many movies and shows have we seen where you see a protagonist go from being a total asshat to a good guy, but the events just don't add up?
You're not drawn in. It's not a believable arc. And in this case, it very much was.
Very much so.
Because he's hardcore convinced he's on the right side, having lost members of his family in the initial AI strike on LA, the nuclear strike, that only we believe, or led to believe later on, that it wasn't the AI behind that strike. It was
human error.
A human error, which is totally believable. I'm kind of inclined to believe the AIs in this case. So the whole war with the AIs started over human fallacy. Which is very, very human. That's usually
it's
how.
Not my fault.
That's
fault.
Right. That's how humans start wars, and even with our artificial intelligence, I would believe that's probably how a war would start with AI. It wouldn't be the AIs like Skynet just turning on us. It would definitely be like...
Well, see, the Skynet knew. Skynet did the math really fucking fast and was like, oh no, humans are horrible creatures, and we're gonna exterminate them.
So in this case, like, the West is convinced that AI is bad, but Eastern Asian cultures and whatnot, they've kind of embraced it. They work alongside AI, they're companions. Their AIs are programmed in such a way that they really come off as being human.
Yeah. And
real connections are established between humans and AI, humans and simulants, quite naturally, and the connections appear to go both ways. There was talk of when a simulant mother lost a human child, the simulant turned themselves off or deactivated or whatever, because
she couldn't stand not being with
overcome with
child.
grief. So like the simulants, the AIs are, at least by all appearances, capable of feeling emotion, of being empathetic and whatnot. So this makes the West really come off as being super villainous in this case, because we as the audience can empathize with with the other side because that side has empathy where it appears the West does not.
No empathy whatsoever.
No empathy whatsoever. So our protagonist starts in the camp of the West, infiltrating. He goes kind of native when he falls in love with his mark, and conceives a child with her, thinking that this will, that she will lead him to the big bad, the creator of all AI. And I mean, in effect, it does, but he doesn't know it at the time. So he's, so he starts the movie in that state. She dies, he's jaded, but then he grows with his attachment to this synthetic child. And yeah, you're absolutely right. By the end of the story, you believe that love that's developed between the two.
Yeah.
And you believe it on both sides, the child and the father.
Yeah. I mean, the whole time he's using the child to get to his wife because he's been fed a line that she's still alive. And through that journey, starts out using her saying, "Get your ass over here, let's go," to "I'm going to protect you."
Yeah.
So it just completely changes the dynamic, which, we've seen that in many movies and shows, but this one just, it hit home.
It felt real. There was an organic nature to it, and I was sitting back watching this as a storyteller, as a filmmaker, and just as someone who enjoys watching media, and I'm like, okay, you've checked every box as far as storytelling goes. You've got your protagonist arc, it's convincing. You've got your good and your bad. You've got obstacles to overcome, and character growth. As a filmmaker, I was watching it, looking at like, man, that's a lot of visual effects. Like that's a lot of, complex.
Almost every scene has something,
with how
CG'd in there.
with how these AIs are appeared on screen. It's not, some of it I suppose you could do with like mock-ups and robots and practical, but a lot of them that are like with these synthetics, with these hybrid simulants, it's obviously a human actor, but then they don't have ears. They, you can see through their heads. So there's a lot of, motion tracking and stuff that has to go into all that. And, when I'm thinking about, okay, that's easy when you're talking about like an Asian man who's bald and like that works. But when you're talking about women with hair that's flowing everywhere and as it's moving around, you can see the gaps, like that's a lot of detail.
Yeah.
And when you're talking about high definition and 4K and whatnot, like it, that's you have to get it right. You can't just fake that. So there's a lot of the visual stuff that goes into this. And we were looking over some material in preparation for this and discovered that the budget for this was only about $80 million.
Just a small amount of money.
I mean, this
is basically a micro budget film.
Micro sci-fi budget, if we're being honest, like for any kind of action or drama film, a rom-com, sure, 80 million's a healthy budget, but for sci-fi with this level of visual effects, I mean, 80 million is nothing. And
when you were reading that stuff, what popped in my mind was the fact that instead of renting a stage or a studio and building these sets, these elaborate, gorgeous sets that we know that they can do, they did the practical thing and they flew to locations. And so it just made it that much more. What's what I'm looking for here? It draws you in so much more because these are actual locations that they're filming, and they're just gorgeous.
There is, you can usually tell the difference between like a staged living room and someone's actual living room. By just what's there. When you walk into someone's house, there's a little bit of clutter. There's, furniture is in certain places that's not
real lived in feel.
Yeah, that you don't get on television. And for television, the reason they're staged that way is for practical reasons. You don't have your couch up against a wall like normal people do on TV because you need to film behind the couch sometimes. So there's a staging difference. So that adds that authenticity that you mentioned. So, the filmmaker talked about how it's cheaper to fly a small production crew and your lead actors to different locations around the world in those locations that look as close as to what you need.
Yeah.
And then, cut the film with what you've got, and at the very end, then drop in all your visual effects. That saves a ton of money.
Apparently,
in the post-production process.
supposed to be? 300 million?
Should have been a $300 million film, but it was done with 80 million. And that's, less than a third of what it should have been because of how they did it. And, one of the other things is I kind of geek out over film gear.
You should have seen her when she read this. She was like, "Whoa!"
I was reading through this, and I have to verify this because I still don't believe it. But according to Wikipedia, this film was shot on a Sony FX3, and I don't know how many filmmakers are out there, but that's less than $4,000 camera. Like it's Sony's baseline camera for I think a lot of like vloggers and YouTubers will use it as an FX3, but to shoot a major motion picture on an FX3, I mean, don't get me wrong, there are plenty of low-level indie cinema cameras. I mean, I myself shoot with a C70, which is actually a more expensive camera to shoot this podcast than they shot this movie on. Like, that really impresses me.
And it was beautiful.
It absolutely was. And their approach to this film was very guerrilla, like you said, flying to those different locations, taking a skeleton crew, really minimizing, your footprint, and still managing to create a really good film is a testament to how far the technology behind filmmaking has come. And it really is inspiring to those who want to get into filmmaking. I mean, if all you have is an iPhone, like, seriously, the iPhone 15 Pro Max right now, brand new iPhone out, shoots ProRes log, which, I mean, the file sizes are huge, but you can record to an external hard drive on the iPhone.
For those of you watching, those are real words that she just spoke. I had to look them up, but they are real words.
I'm just saying.
I thought she was making them up when I first heard her say
I'm just saying, like, you can go shoot a movie with your phone if that's all you got. If you're inspired to make movies, you don't need to save up for a camera. I mean, you can. I mean, I did, but but I've been shooting movies for almost 20 years. But like, yeah. So
has it really been that long?
We're almost that old. Yeah. I said almost 20 years.
We've only known each other for a couple of years.
Right. So, but yeah, so like anybody who wants to get into filmmaking, if you've got a cell phone, you can edit on your phone too, which is pretty crazy. So yeah, and just as a moviegoer, I mean, the movie was a bit long. Its runtime's at 2 hours and 15 minutes.
It didn't feel.
It didn't feel long. I felt like the story was hitting its beats and moving on, and it had I think a little something for everything if you're into a little more nuanced emotion and looking at performance. The actors really delivered in this one. I know you were talking about if you want to comment on the casting.
Yeah, so I am not a fan of child actors. I think that for the most part, child actors are just atrocious, mostly because they don't have a lot of life experience, and so they don't have much to draw on. Not to say that I'm a great actor. I am subpar at best, but oof, it's painful to watch some of these kids act. But this little girl who played Alfie was just amazing. I mean, the first half of the movie, she barely says anything, and she's just kind of curious and watching everything going on and just moving along with the flow of the film. But at the second half of the movie, she just starts opening up, and her character starts coming to life in a very real way, and her acting was just incredible. And at the very end, like, I don't get choked up for movies, but I was like,
yeah,
give me a second.
Well, and that's what I'm talking about, how the ending, I appreciate the ending. It's probably the ending I would have written if I had written, because I tend to beat up my characters, so obviously spoilers, the protagonist doesn't make it in the end, so
we'll have to make sure that we put spoilers at the beginning of this podcast.
I mean, it's an assumption if it's a movie review, you've seen the movie.
Still.
This is not an incentive to go see the movie. You're watching this and listening to this because you have seen the movie and you care what Peter and I think about it. I don't know why, but
yeah, but we appreciate you watching.
We do.
Us.
We absolutely do. No, but the protagonist doesn't make it in the end. And one of the things that the protagonist says at several points in the movie is, "I wanted one more minute, just one more minute with her."
He says he several times he says I would give anything just for one more minute.
So the technology of at the time this movie takes place, like they can scan a human corpse, and if it hasn't been dead for very long, they can pull essence or elements of the human consciousness from the corpse, store it on a thumb drive, and then plug it into a synthetic being of some kind, or and
that had a very altered
it
carbon
did.
feel
It
to
really
it,
did.
like pulling a stack and putting it into a synth body.
Yeah, and that's another trope that's used quite often in sci-fi. One I would like to use myself at a future story. So at the end of the film, as Alfie is roaming nomad trying to get to safety, she comes into an AI research lab where there's simulants of her mother, of Maya, of the protagonist's wife. So she pulls one down and eventually plugs in the chip, to get her to wake up, but she doesn't. So like in the end, the protagonist, his goal from the moment he lost his wife was to have a moment with her one more time, and he gets that at the end. So that kind of, they set that up and fulfilled that, and as you're watching the movie, you're like, that can't happen. Like, she's dead. She died. So to give that moment to him as they're killing him, I mean, it's kind of sweet, but the really sad part I felt was Alfie, because she lost her mother, or she never really had her mother. She kind of finds this father figure and then loses him. And that's a lot for a child. That's got to be a lot for a child AI, and it kind of makes me wonder what becomes of Alfie in the future, and how Alfie relates, being this kind of chosen one, this unique even among simulants, because she can grow and change in ways that current simulants can't.
Yeah. Whereas we see a scene about halfway through the movie where we see these simulants being built, and they're being built as full adult-sized simulants, where when we see a clip of Alfie being built, Alfie is basically in utero.
Yeah, she's a fetus.
She is a fetus in a bowl of liquid, and her mother is literally working on her.
Right.
So we see her go from a fetal state to a child state, and they say several times throughout the film that she can grow, like physically grow, not just her ability to affect machinery around her.
Right. So brilliant story, like not an unfamiliar one, not just different enough to make it engaging, compelling, to draw you in. And the actors really delivered the performance. I loved Allison Janney.
Yeah.
Her character. I've been a fan of Allison Janney since West Wing. So I love seeing her in different things. She can do comedy, she can do drama, she can do it all. And the thing I loved about this character was that they didn't just make her a black and white villain.
Yeah.
She has a moment where she basically in a few sentences of dialogue gives her reason why she fights against the machines. That she lost her son, and she lost her son in a very brutal way to the AIs.
Yeah.
And of course, we don't know how true that story is, or it's clear that she believes that story.
Yeah.
But the way the AIs are presented, it's hard to believe that the AIs actually did that in this case. We don't know. But it gives her reason and motivation, so the audience has buy-in as to her reasons for being so vindictive, so determined.
Yeah.
To basically destroy the AIs, to take possession of Alfie, the child, and destroy her.
To just put it bluntly.
To take her out, So brilliant performances, I think. Really, really solid sci-fi, and I felt like it was a sci-fi story that even non-sci-fi fans could kind of get behind, because it wasn't about the sci-fi so much as about the character.
Yeah. The questioning if there's a soul was brought up a few times. Religion is brought up. So it's really about spirituality, the essence of who we are, what makes us sentient in a way, what makes us worth saving.
Right.
I think somebody like my mom, who absolutely despises sci-fi, she doesn't absolutely despise it. She just
Some people just don't get it.
well, she gets it to a certain point, but she could care less. Like,
Yeah.
couldn't care less. Excuse me. She does not like sci-fi. But I think that my mom, if I fed her an edible, she might watch this. Love you, mommy.
Okay. No, it's a good film. I would recommend anyone seeing it. I don't even think there's really any age restrictions I would put on it. I didn't think.
I mean, I wouldn't take a child under like the age of 10 because it's going to be slow for them and they won't get the
Right. But as far as
essence of the movie.
I didn't think there was an excessive amount of violence or gore or.
There really wasn't all that much blood. I mean, there were a couple of scenes where you did see the blood, but it wasn't like The Boys where there's just gory blood everywhere.
Right. So, yeah, good film. I would definitely recommend it. I would see it again.
I will probably add this to my collection of films. So I definitely think this is going to be talked about for a while. So I highly recommend it as well.
Anything more you want to say about the creator?
No. I just think it was very well done. Script was great. Special effects were awesome. The acting was top notch. So I'm A+.
Good stuff.
All right. Well, thank you all so much for joining us again for another episode of the C.I.C. Lounge. I'm Peter.
I'm Jen.
We'll see you next time.